Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to be huge. Way bigger than I thought it was going to be. Way bigger than many people probably thought it was going to be. With every consecutive update that we get on the game from the developers, the scope of the game just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And normally that would be an area of caution, because many developers, when they're making these wide scope games, tend to not really focus on the finer details, which makes it a little bit less of an enjoyable experience. However, that is quite the opposite with Dragon's Dogma 2, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I thought that Baldur's Gate 3 would be the last game that I could really sink hundreds and hundreds of hours into, at least for quite a while. Looks like I was wrong. Very wrong.
The return of the Sovereign.
Dragon's Dogma 2 is the highly anticipated sequel in the Dragon's Dogma series, an action RPG developed and published by Capcom. Building on the success of the original game, which was noted for its unique pawn system, grounded action combat, and engaging open-world gameplay, the sequel promises to deliver a much larger, a significantly larger world, approximately 4 times the size of its predecessor. This expansion allows for richer exploration, more complex AI interactions, a fleshed-out story, and it's going to be packed with content that many players are not going to find. These enhancements aim to deepen the experience, offering both fans of the original and new players a vast, immersive fantasy world to explore. If you've had the pleasure of playing Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, then you already know that the original offering for the original game was pretty big. There was a lot of different areas to explore. There was a lot of variety in the different biomes and things like that. But with that said, for them to say that Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to be 4 times the size of Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen is a bit intimidating, because that's a really big game. That's a really tall order, and it has me sitting here asking myself how I'm going to find time to do anything other than play this game. I'm going to live in this game. In Dragon's Dogma 2, the world scale has been significantly increased compared to its predecessor. The expansion is not just in sheer terms of size, but also the diversity of environments it's going to be on offer. We can expect to traverse a wide range of landscapes, from bustling, intricate cities to dense forest, open plains, mountains, and more. Each area is crafted to enrich the exploration experience, providing new sights, challenges, and discoveries at every turn. The impact of this larger world on the gameplay is going to be multifaceted. Not only is this going to enhance our sense of adventure, but it's going to be enticing us to dive further into the unknown and uncover hidden locations and secrets. The sense of exploration is central to the RPG experience, and with this increased scale of Dragon's Dogma 2 that they're promising, it's going to make our adventures just that much more immersive and rewarding. We are going to find ourselves deeply engaged in the lore and the history of the game as we search through these different areas and uncover their story. Hideki Itsuno actually commented on the seamlessness of this exploration that we're going to experience, saying, "Speaking to the seamlessness of the world, there are no loading screens when you're exploring. Of course, if there's a cutscene, we might load you in and then load you back into free exploration, but in terms of actually going into a dungeon or caves or exploring different parts of the world, you'll never see a loading screen." The expanded world size naturally leads to a greater variety and depth in quests and encounters. We can anticipate a wide array of quests that are going to weave into the larger narrative tapestry of the game. These are going to range from pivotal story missions that advance the main plot to side quests that are going to offer insights into the world's lore and the lives of its inhabitants. The diversity in quest design is going to be matched by the variety of monsters and characters that we're going to encounter throughout the game. These encounters are not only going to challenge our combat skills, but also enrich our experience about learning of the game's world. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the world for Dragon's Dogma, the original game, was pretty varied. There were a lot of different biomes, different monsters that were in those biomes. Many of them had monsters unique specifically to those areas because that was their natural habitat, because it makes sense in a game world. And knowing that the game is going to be as big as it's going to be, I'm really wondering how many different encounters Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to be giving us, because not only are we going to have these much more vast areas to explore, but there's going to be more variety as well. Now, with that said, when they talk about the exploration for this game, it reminds me of the first time that I played Elder Scrolls Oblivion or Skyrim. These games where I could just see something off in the distance and start walking towards it, that I could potentially get lost and not find my way back, that I could stumble upon some secret or some quest that nobody else has found, and for the most part, the devs have pretty much confirmed it. In a recent interview with IGN while discussing the Sphinx, game director Hideki Itsuno and lead game designer Kento Kinoshita gave context to just how big this world is going to be and how varied our experiences may be from player to player. The two had said, "The journey to finding it may be the biggest mystery of all. Meanwhile, even though the Sphinx is one of the game's feature attractions, it has nothing to do with the progression of the main game." How do I even put it? It's a special part of the game, but it exists off in its own corner. There are a lot of large monsters like this. We can't really go into detail, but we've really gone all out. I imagine there will be a lot of players who beat the game without ever even encountering the Sphinx. We've made a lot that players don't necessarily need to find, but will be incredibly moved if they do find it. Open world games like Dragon's Dogma 2 offer a unique and memorable experience primarily because of their expansive and richly detailed environments. The concept of having hidden elements like the Sphinx that are significant yet not directly tied to the game's main progression adds a layer of depth and mystery. This approach encourages exploration beyond just the main storyline, inviting us to venture into less traveled paths. What makes this experience that much more special is discovery and wonder. Stumbling upon something grand and unexpected, like a hidden monster or a secret location, provides a feeling of personal achievement and surprise. These elements are not just adding to the game's content, they're about creating moments that feel personal to each player. Similar to Itsuno, Sven Vinke, the head of Larian Studios' Baldur's Gate 3, did an interview where he said that they made content for 2% of players. No, that 2% of the 2% of players may actually find. And they pulled it off, because I can't tell you how many times I was playing Baldur's Gate 3 and looked something up to find that nobody else was talking about it because nobody else had found it yet. How many times I had streamed the game and people were like, "Where is this? Where are you? What is that?" Because they hadn't seen it even after hundreds of hours of gameplay. 400 hours of playing Baldur's Gate 3, and I am still to this day discovering things that I didn't even know existed. And that's an incredibly special experience that I want to see more games try to capture, because I feel as though that's actually designing a game meant for how players actually play a game. And what I mean by that is that knowing that players are not going to travel the beaten path, that we're going to do things that the developers may not be able to predict, and then trying to design a game around that kind of thing makes a really memorable and really enjoyable experience, one that you own yourself. And that is insanely important. And it's something that I want to see more games do in the future, because you're never going to forget it. Those are the things that make games worth our money and worth our time. In Dragon's Dogma 2, a significant enhancement is the introduction of dynamic NPC interactions. Building on the affinity system of the first game, unlike Dragon's Dogma 1, where affinity was primarily between the main character and other characters, the sequel is going to expand upon this concept to include relationships between NPCs themselves. This change adds a new layer of complexity and realism to the game's world. NPCs having affinities with one another means that they can form alliances or engage in conflicts independently of the player's actions. This dynamic creates a living, breathing world where relationships evolve and change, mirroring the complexities of real-life interactions. It enriches storytelling as players might encounter varying scenarios based on NPC interactions, making each playthrough unique. This system also enhances the role-playing aspect of the game, as players must consider not only their actions, but also how they might influence or be influenced by existing relationships within the game's world. It contributes to a much more immersive and engaging experience where the game world feels less like a backdrop and more like an active participant in the narrative. Quoting Itsuno directly, "I wanted to create detailed NPCs even if it was on a limited scale. We ended up with a ridiculous number of NPCs this time around, but we wanted characters who lived in the world and acted according to their own goals. They make decisions for themselves, and the world properly reacts to those reasoned NPC actions." We put a lot of work into thinking about and creating this kind of system. In the first game, affinity existed only between player and NPCs, but in this game, it's NPCs as well. Say an NPC takes a liking to the player. If there's another NPC who feels the same way, well, that's a situation where the two NPCs probably won't get along, right? Itsuno's love and energy for Dragon's Dogma 2 is absolutely infectious. If you guys haven't had the opportunity to go and watch any of the IGN interviews, you need to, because it's a great watch, it's a great read, and it just makes you even more excited for the game. It's largely the reason why I'm making this video in the first place. Now, with that said, this discussion around NPCs and how they can interact with one another kind of reminds me of the philosophy behind Monster Hunter games, where the monsters are supposed to live inside of a environment that's specifically built for them. They react not only to other monsters in that environment, but also the environment itself. It's an ecosystem, and it feels like they're taking that philosophy and applying it to Dragon's Dogma 2, which is huge because we want to have games that not only just react to us, but also react to themselves. Because when we see a world not react to its own actions, it ends up being a little bit immersion breaking. And knowing that they're going to have these NPC interactions, as well as they talked about how there could be random monster raids if it just so happens that a ogre, pats or patrols into a village, it'll start attacking the village, and the villagers will act accordingly. They'll try to fight back, or they'll run away, or whatever they'll do. And seeing that kind of thing happen makes the game feel like it's a living, breathing world that we are just along for the ride. I love that. The questing system in Dragon's Dogma 2 has been meticulously overhauled to offer a much more dynamic and player-driven experience. Unlike the more linear approach to the first game, where there were some quests that you could miss because you didn't realize that they were on a timer, and then you'd have to just go play the game all over again to be able to do it, in the sequel, quests are designed to be much less linear, with multiple pathways and different outcomes depending on our choices and our actions. This branching quest structure not only adds to the replayability, but also provides a much more personalized experience, as each player's journey through the game is going to be different than the next. The expanded story is another area where Dragon's Dogma 2 aims to surpass its predecessor. The narrative is expected to be much more intricate, weaving together the personalized stories of the protagonist and other key characters with the broader geopolitical and mystical elements of the game's world. This narrative complexity is designed to offer a much more engaging and thought-provoking experience with themes that resonate with us long after we finish the game. The original Dragon's Dogma was a bold and ambitious project, but it was also a game that was marked by constraints for its development. A significant portion of the intended story and the content and the context was trimmed out of the game due to time and budget limitations, leading to the overall final product, while still impressive, falling short of the developer's original vision. One of the most notable instances of this game's unfulfilled promises was venturing into another country. Players were tantalized with the prospect of exploring new, diverse landscapes and cultures, a feature that would have significantly expanded on the scope and also the narrative of the game. However, this feature was, well, a promise that remained unfulfilled, leaving players with a sense of incompletion and a thirst for a much richer and much more expansive adventure that could have been. However, those constraints seem to be lifted. Capcom seems to be giving these guys the full green light to do what they want. And Hideki Itsuno has been dreaming of making this game to its full completion for over 20 years, since he was in school. For almost half of his life, he's been dreaming about making this game, and now we will have the opportunity to play that, and I think that that's something that's incredibly special. Now, with that said, I realize that there's a little bit of a bad taste lately in people's mouths over, well, Capcom, because they have some odd dealings with modding and speed runs, glitching, and just about everything else. But regardless, the one thing that I would like people to try to keep in mind is that over the last decade, Capcom has been one of the most consistent AAA developers and publishers that we've had. Not every single game has been a massive hit, but for the most part, every single AAA game that they have made has been an absolute banger for the last 10 years. And that's a long time running. And with such a great track record, it leads me to believe that Dragon's Dogma 2 is going to be everything it's promised and more. And that makes me just that much more excited about this game, because it's relatively difficult for us to do so anymore, with many games coming out that don't necessarily meet our expectations, or some of them just being entirely fake to begin with. The day before. Also, Quinfall, too. What's going on with games lately? Yet Pal World comes out, and it's actually a real game, and it's good. What kind of world do we live in anymore? No idea. Anyway, with any news that we get on Dragon's Dogma, the game just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's bigger than I thought it was going to be. It's probably bigger than you thought it was going to be, and it's probably still going to surprise us once it's actually released. And all I can say is I cannot wait for this game to come out, because I am going to go so hard on this game. Oh my god, I'm gonna go so hard. We are in it. That's all I gotta say. We in this thing. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys are looking forward to Dragon's Dogma 2 and more content on Dragon's Dogma 2, because I'm obviously going to be covering that as well. If you guys did enjoy the video, think about supporting the channel. I'm leaving my Patreon link down below. Every little bit helps. And outside of that, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends. I will see you in the next video. Peace.